Security! We have a vagrant in the showroom! The salesman's voice cracked as mud-caked boots tracked dirt across $60,000 of Italian marble, each step leaving brown smears that made nearby customers gasp and pull back in disgust. The man in torn coveralls stood frozen between two aircraft worth more than small nations' GDP, dirt clinging to his weathered hands while his jacket reeked of fertilizer and sweat. Behind him, a pristine Gulfstream G700's price tag gleamed. $78,000. Sir, I'm calling airport security right now, the young salesman declared, his manicured finger hovering over his phone as whispers rippled through the crowd and a woman pulled her child closer. Someone started filming the confrontation, sensing drama unfolding. The stranger's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. I'm here to buy a jet. Explosive laughter erupted from the salesman's throat, echoing off the showroom walls. These black stories reveal humanity's ugliest truths when power meets prejudice. Have you ever been judged in 10 seconds? These real-life stories prove first impressions can destroy everything. Perhaps you're lost, sir? Brad Wellington III's voice carried the practiced condescension of inherited privilege as he approached, his Armani suit and Harvard MBA pin gleaming under the showroom lights. At 28, he'd perfected the art of dismissing people within seconds, and this dirt-covered intruder was clearly beneath his clientele's standards. The commercial terminal is 2 miles that way. They have a McDonald's if you're hungry. Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd of wealthy customers who'd begun filming the spectacle, their phones capturing every humiliating second. The stranger remained motionless, his weathered hands steady despite the growing audience, while dirt continued flaking from his boots onto the $60,000 Italian marble. Something about his stillness suggested patience born from years of being underestimated. The showroom's digital clock read 10:47 a.m. 13 minutes until something important, though Brad couldn't have known what. In the stranger's shirt pocket, barely visible beneath stained fabric, the corner of a Singapore Airlines first-class ticket protruded like a whispered secret. The golden logo caught light for just an instant before disappearing back into shadow. I'm here about aircraft, the stranger said quietly, his slight accent making Brad's smirk widen with cruel amusement. I need to see your available inventory. The words were measured, careful, as if he was accustomed to being misunderstood and had learned to speak with deliberate precision. Aircraft? Brad's laughter exploded across the showroom like breaking glass. Sir, our cheapest model starts at $12 million. Cash. These aren't used cars from a lot somewhere. They're sophisticated flying machines that require serious financial verification. He gestured dramatically toward the gleaming jets, his voice rising to ensure the growing audience could hear every cutting word. At Jet Life Reviews, a TikTok influencer with 2 million followers, had positioned herself perfectly to capture the confrontation. Her live stream viewer count climbed rapidly, 25,000, then 50,000, then 75,000 people watching this class warfare unfold in real time. Guys, this is absolutely unreal, she whispered to her phone. This salesman is literally destroying this poor man for wanting to look at planes. The privilege is disgusting. The stranger reached into his jacket and withdrew a battered leather briefcase, its brass clasps tarnished with age and the embossing nearly worn away. Chen Agricultural Solutions. As he set it on a glass display table, Brad's nose wrinkled with theatrical disgust. May I ask about your Gulfstream G650? I saw it in your inventory. That's a $40 million aircraft, Brad replied, his voice dripping with manufactured patience. It requires net worth verification of at least $100 million before we even discuss a test flight. Do you understand those numbers? He spoke slowly, as if addressing a child, while several customers nodded approvingly at his professional handling of an obvious vagrant. 10:50 a.m. The clock's red digits seemed to pulse with urgency that only the stranger noticed. Airport announcements echoed in the distance. Singapore Airlines Flight 25 now boarding first-class passengers at Gate A7. His eyes flicked toward the sound, calculating time and distance with practiced efficiency. Your commission structure, the stranger said suddenly, catching Brad completely off guard. What percentage do you earn on sales? The question came from nowhere, sharp and unexpected like a blade between ribs. Brad blinked, momentarily speechless. That's confidential information and completely irrelevant to your situation. His voice cracked slightly as he realized he'd just admitted there was commission involved, potentially damaging information in front of potential customers who might now question his motives. Humor me, the stranger pressed, his tone remaining conversational despite the growing tension. Around them, the crowd had grown to over 20 people, all recording, all waiting for blood. At Jet Life Reviews' viewer count had exploded past 150,000, her comment section a waterfall of outrage and anticipation. 2%, Brad admitted reluctantly, the words barely audible. But that doesn't matter because you clearly can't afford anything here. He gestured dismissively, trying to regain control of a situation that was spiraling beyond his comfort zone. The stranger nodded thoughtfully. 2% of $40 million. $800,000. More than your annual salary, I'd imagine. He paused, letting the mathematics hang in the air like a loaded weapon. Enough to change someone's life completely. Brad's face flushed crimson as nervous laughter died in his throat. Several customers exchanged glances, suddenly uncomfortable with the salesman's obvious desperation for commission. The power dynamic had shifted subtly but unmistakably, though Brad was too arrogant to recognize the danger. 10:52 a.m. 8 minutes remaining until the stranger's flight, though the crowd had no way of knowing that a countdown was ticking toward something that would change everything. The worn briefcase sat unopened on the glass table, its secrets still hidden while social media exploded around them. Security! Brad finally snapped, his composure cracking under the pressure of viral scrutiny. This man is disrupting our business and harassing customers. I want him removed immediately. He pulled out his phone with shaking fingers, his Harvard-educated confidence evaporating under the weight of 200,000 live viewers witnessing his unprofessional meltdown. The stranger checked his watch, an expensive titanium piece that seemed incongruous with his appearance, and smiled for the first time. It wasn't pleasant. 8 minutes, he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. This should be interesting. These black stories always begin with assumptions. These life stories revealing humanity's capacity for cruelty when we think we hold all the power. But touching stories like this prove that real-life stories often have twists that no one sees coming. 10:53 a.m. 7 minutes until Singapore Airlines Flight 25 departed, and the stranger's calm suggested he was tracking every second with lethal precision. Security guards burst through the showroom entrance, their hands resting on restraints as Brad gestured frantically like a man drowning in his own arrogance. The crowd had swollen to 40 people, phones blazing like digital weapons, capturing what was becoming the most viral confrontation of the year. Officers! Arrest this vagrant immediately! Brad's voice cracked with hysteria as sweat destroyed his $300 haircut. He's trespassing, disrupting business, and probably planning to steal something valuable. Look at him! His Harvard MBA had never prepared him for crisis management under the scrutiny of 400,000 live viewers, and his professional facade was disintegrating in real time. The lead security guard approached with obvious reluctance, his 20 years of airport experience telling him this situation felt wrong. Sir, you need to come with us now, he said quietly, though his partner hung back, clearly uncomfortable arresting someone for the crime of being poor in an expensive showroom. Behind them, more security personnel appeared, turning the confrontation into what looked like a small army surrounding one unarmed man. At Jet Life Reviews had positioned herself perfectly to capture the approaching climax, her live stream exploding across platforms as viewers shared faster than servers could process. 500,000 people are watching this man about to be arrested for wanting to buy a plane, she whispered urgently. The comments are going absolutely insane. People are calling this the most disgusting display of classism they've ever seen. The stranger looked at the circle of security guards with the same measured calm he'd maintained throughout. But something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, but calculation. Officers, I understand your position, but arresting me would be problematic. His voice carried a quiet authority that made the lead guard hesitate mid-step, though he couldn't explain why a man in coveralls suddenly seemed dangerous. Problematic? Brad shrieked, his composure completely shattered. You're a homeless vagrant who wandered into our showroom. The only problem is why you haven't been arrested yet. Several customers recoiled from his manic energy, phones capturing his complete professional meltdown as social media erupted with calls for his immediate firing. 10:54 a.m. 6 minutes remaining. Final boarding call for Singapore Airlines Flight 25 to Singapore, echoed through the terminal, and the stranger's eyes tracked the sound with predatory focus. From his jacket, he withdrew a device that made everyone freeze. Sleek, black, with military-grade construction that screamed government contractor rather than farming equipment. What is that? The security guard demanded, his hand moving to his radio as the crowd tensed with sudden electricity. The device looked like it belonged in a war room, not a farmer's pocket, and its presence transformed the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Satellite communication array, the stranger replied casually, his thumb hovering over a single red button. Encrypted channel to my logistics coordinator. Agricultural operations across 17 time zones require constant coordination. He spoke as if commanding international supply chains was perfectly normal for someone wearing torn coveralls, though several people in the crowd exchanged looks of dawning recognition. Sarah Mitchell had been watching through security cameras, growing increasingly alarmed as the situation spiraled beyond containment. At 45, she'd survived enough retail disasters to smell lawsuit potential from 3 floors away, and she burst onto the showroom floor like a woman trying to prevent corporate suicide. "Everyone stop," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "What exactly is happening here?" "This vagrant is disrupting our clientele and needs immediate removal," Brad snarled, pointing at the stranger like he was identifying a plague carrier. Security should have dragged him out 10 minutes ago instead of letting him contaminate our showroom. His words hit the air like thrown acid, making even his supporters wince at their naked cruelty. The stranger's device began emitting a soft, pulsing sound that seemed to synchronize with something beyond the showroom, perhaps satellites, perhaps worse. "Ma'am, I appreciate your intervention," he said to Sarah with genuine respect. "I'm simply trying to purchase aircraft before my departure. Cash transaction, no financing required." His politeness contrasted sharply with the military-grade technology in his hand. 10:55 a.m. 5 minutes until takeoff, and the titanium watch on his wrist, worth more than most luxury cars, caught light as he checked the time again. Brad had somehow failed to notice that the vagrant's timepiece cost more than his monthly salary, too blinded by prejudice to recognize wealth that didn't conform to his expectations. "Sir, you need to put that device away immediately," the lead security guard commanded, though his voice carried uncertainty rather than authority. The device's pulsing had increased in frequency, suggesting it was connecting to systems beyond their understanding or control. Around them, the crowd pressed closer, sensing they were witnessing something that would define social media for months. The stranger smiled for the first time, and it wasn't pleasant. "Officers, arresting me would create complications." He held up the device so everyone could see its display, rows of numbers that looked like coordinates, timestamps, and what appeared to be financial figures with more zeros than most people saw in a lifetime. "My logistics coordinator is very protective of our operations." "Logistics coordinator?" Sarah asked, her retail instincts screaming that this situation had moved far beyond her training to handle. Something about the stranger's calm suggested he wasn't just any customer. and the technology in his hand looked like it belonged to people who didn't get arrested by airport security. Brad was completely unhinged now, his Armani suit wrinkled with sweat as he pointed frantically at the stranger. "He's probably a terrorist! That device could be a bomb! Arrest him now before he kills us all!" His hysteria was so complete that several customers began backing away from him rather than the man he was accusing. 10:56 a.m. 4 minutes until departure, and at Jet Life Review's viewer count hit 700,000 as #Jet Salesman exploded across every platform simultaneously. The stranger checked his watch one final time, his expression shifting from patient to predatory as he realized his timeline was becoming critical. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos like a scalpel, "I believe it's time we discussed my actual net worth." The device in his hand pulsed faster, its display showing what appeared to be bank account information that made Sarah's eyes widen in complete shock. The security guards froze as they glimpsed numbers that seemed impossible, while Brad continued ranting about terrorists and bombs, completely oblivious that the next 60 seconds would transform him from viral sensation to cautionary tale about the dangers of judging books by their covers. 10:57 a.m. 3 minutes until his flight, and the stranger's finger moved deliberately across the device's surface, activating something that made the air itself seem to vibrate with electronic anticipation. The crowd held its collective breath as numbers began cascading across the device's display, coordinates, timestamps, and figures that defied comprehension. Sarah's face went pale as she glimpsed amounts that looked like phone numbers rather than bank balances. "Officers, before you make a career-ending mistake," the stranger said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown men reconsider their life choices, "perhaps you should know who you're about to arrest." He turned the device toward the security guards, and what they saw made the lead officer's hand fall away from his restraints as if they'd become red-hot. The display showed a Chase private client banking interface, but the numbers scrolling across it seemed to break the laws of mathematics. Account balance, $847,000. Agricultural holdings portfolio, $2.3 billion. Daily transaction volume, $15.7 million. The figures updated in real time, showing money flowing across continents like digital rivers, while the man in coveralls stood motionless in the center of a luxury aircraft showroom. That's not possible," Brad whispered, his voice barely audible as his brain struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. The numbers kept climbing, updating every few seconds as markets across Asia completed transactions that generated more wealth per minute than he'd see in several lifetimes. His Harvard MBA had taught him about wealth, but this was something beyond education. This was power that operated on scales he'd never imagined. Jet Life Review's live stream exploded as viewers screamed disbelief in languages from dozens of countries. Her viewer count shattered every record she'd ever set. 800,000, then 900,000. Then crossing the million mark as people shared the stream faster than her analytics could track. "Holy shit, guys," she whispered, forgetting her usual family-friendly language. "This man has almost $1 billion. $1 billion! And they were trying to arrest him for being poor." The stranger's thumb moved across the device again, bringing up a secondary screen that made Sarah stumble backward as if she'd been physically struck. The display showed agricultural operations spanning 6 continents, vertical farms in Singapore processing 400,000 tons annually, hydroponic facilities across California supplying 23% of the West Coast's produce, research laboratories in the Netherlands developing revolutionary growing techniques that would feed millions. "Marcus Chen," he said simply, finally revealing his identity as airport announcements echoed his departure countdown. "Chen Agricultural Solutions. We supply fresh produce to 40% of the United States West Coast market." His voice remained calm, conversational, as if commanding a multi-billion-dollar agricultural empire was perfectly ordinary for someone whose boots were still caked with actual farm soil. The name hit the crowd like an explosion. Marcus Chen, the agricultural revolutionary who'd developed vertical farming technology that could grow crops in deserts. The visionary who'd sold patents to major corporations for $800 million in 2023. The man whose innovations were feeding millions while simultaneously generating wealth that rivaled small nations' GDP. You're Marcus Chen? Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief and dawning horror as she realized her employee had just humiliated one of the most successful agricultural innovators in human history. The Marcus Chen who revolutionized vertical farming? Who sold those patents to Monsanto and ADM? Her retail training had never prepared her for the moment when a billionaire customer got mistaken for a vagrant. Brad's face had gone through several color changes, settling on a sickly green that matched his growing nausea. But you're wearing coveralls, he stammered weakly, as if clothing choices somehow invalidated bank statements showing wealth that exceeded most countries' annual budgets. You smell like fertilizer. You have dirt under your fingernails. Because I was working, Marcus replied with the patience of someone accustomed to explaining obvious concepts to people who'd never worked with their hands. I spent this morning in our Singapore facility optimizing growing cycles for our new hydroponic systems. Good soil teaches you things that boardrooms never can. He held up his hands, showing the honest dirt that came from touching the earth that fed the world. The security guards had backed away completely, their radios crackling with urgent communications as their supervisors realized the scope of the disaster unfolding in real time. Airport management was probably having emergency meetings about how to apologize to a man whose agricultural operations were worth more than the entire airport's annual revenue. 10:58 a.m. 2 minutes until departure, and Marcus's device chimed with what sounded like an incoming call. "Excuse me," he said politely, pressing the device to his ear while 1.2 million people watched through @JetLife Reviews' stream. "Yes, I'm still at the airport. Slight delay in aircraft acquisition. No, nothing serious. Just educating some people about assumptions." The conversation was brief, conducted in what sounded like Mandarin mixed with technical English that suggested he was coordinating operations across multiple time zones simultaneously. When he finished, he turned back to the crowd with the same measured calm he'd maintained throughout the encounter. "My logistics coordinator is concerned about our Singapore departure schedule," Marcus explained, checking his titanium watch again. "We have 700 farms across 6 continents that require daily coordination. Today alone, we'll process 43,000 tons of produce for distribution across 17 countries. That requires precise timing." Sarah was frantically calculating damage control scenarios in her head, trying to determine how much this public relations disaster would cost the company. Having a billionaire customer humiliated and nearly arrested while being live-streamed to over 1 million viewers was the kind of corporate nightmare that destroyed careers and generated lawsuits that lasted for years. "Mr. Chen," she began desperately, "I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. Brad was clearly out of line, and we want to make this right immediately." Her voice carried the desperation of someone watching her professional life collapse in real time while social media documented every moment. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, then activated another function on his device. The display shifted to show aircraft specifications, detailed technical analyses of various jets with performance metrics that suggested he'd been researching this purchase for months. "I need 3 Gulfstream G650s for our agricultural operations," he said calmly. "Cash purchase, immediate delivery if possible. My operations require constant travel between facilities." The numbers appeared on his screen. 3 aircraft at $40 million each, plus customization for agricultural monitoring equipment, plus expedited delivery fees. Total purchase price, $127 million, displayed as casually as most people might show a grocery receipt. Brad had gone completely silent, his brain apparently unable to process the mathematics of his own stupidity. 2% commission on $127 million would have been $2.54 million. Enough to change his life forever, enough to pay off his student loans and buy houses for his entire extended family. Instead, he'd just laughed at the largest commission opportunity of his career while being recorded by over 1 million witnesses. The irony, Marcus continued conversationally, is that I actually prefer working with sales professionals who understand agriculture, people who recognize that wealth comes in many forms, and that some of us choose to stay connected to the soil that feeds the world. He gestured toward his coveralls, which now seemed less like poverty and more like a badge of authentic success. 10:59 a.m. 1 minute until departure, and Marcus's expression shifted slightly, suggesting his patience was approaching its limits. The device in his hand pulsed once more, displaying what appeared to be contact information for competing aircraft dealers, people who might appreciate a $127 million sale more than someone who judged customers by their appearance. The crowd watched in absolute silence as touching stories became real-life stories, as assumptions collided with reality in ways that would generate black stories about privilege and prejudice for years to come. Life stories that proved wealth and wisdom could wear work clothes while ignorance dressed in Italian suits. The revelation had transformed the entire showroom's atmosphere from hostile confrontation to stunned reverence. But Marcus wasn't finished educating his audience about the dangers of superficial judgment. His device chimed again, displaying incoming messages from agricultural facilities across 3 continents. Reminders that his business empire operated on scales that made luxury aircraft purchases seem like pocket change. "Brad," Marcus said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a surgical instrument. "You asked about my net worth verification. Here's something interesting about wealth. It's not always packaged the way people expect." He activated another screen on his device, showing real-time commodity prices, futures contracts, and agricultural exports that generated more revenue per hour than most companies earned per year. The young salesman's Harvard education had taught him about market analysis, but watching billions of dollars in agricultural products move across global markets in real time was beyond anything his professors had ever demonstrated. "Today alone," Marcus continued, "our operations will generate approximately $2.3 million in revenue. That's more than your annual salary earned every single day." At JetLife Reviews had stopped trying to provide commentary, simply holding her phone steady as her audience exploded across every social media platform simultaneously. Billionaire Farmer was trending globally, with millions of people sharing clips of the most expensive customer service failure in retail history. Her stream had become appointment viewing for anyone who'd ever been judged by their appearance. "The beautiful thing about agriculture," Marcus said, his tone becoming almost philosophical, "is that it teaches you what really matters. Soil doesn't care about your suit. Plants don't grow faster because you have an MBA. Success comes from understanding fundamentals, something your sales training apparently didn't cover." Sarah was desperately trying to formulate damage control strategies, but she realized that any apology would seem hollow after such public humiliation. The company's stock would probably drop when markets opened. Social media would demand accountability, and corporate headquarters would want explanations for how their premier showroom had become a viral symbol of everything wrong with customer service. 11 a.m. Flight departure time, and Marcus's device displayed a final message that made him smile, the first genuine expression of amusement he'd shown throughout the entire encounter. "My pilot is wondering if I'm still planning to take commercial flights," he explained to the crowd. "Apparently, watching your boss get arrested for buying airplanes creates some confusion about transportation logistics." He pressed a button on his device, and somewhere in the distance, engines began spinning up with the distinctive whine of private jets preparing for departure. "The advantage of owning your own aircraft," Marcus noted conversationally, "is that departure times become flexible when you're conducting important business." Brad finally found his voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. "You own other planes?" The question revealed the depth of his misunderstanding. This wasn't a poor man trying to buy his first aircraft. This was a billionaire adding to an existing fleet that probably rivaled small airlines. 17 aircraft currently, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. Everything from crop dusters for field surveys to long-range jets for international coordination. Agriculture is a global business that requires global mobility. He showed his device's screen again, displaying a fleet management system that tracked aircraft across 6 continents in real time. The mathematical reality hit Brad like a physical blow. If Marcus already owned 17 aircraft worth hundreds of millions, then his potential lifetime value as a customer wasn't just the $127 million purchase he'd mentioned. It was potentially billions in ongoing business. Brad had just destroyed the most valuable customer relationship of his career while being watched by millions of witnesses. Security guards who'd been prepared to arrest Marcus were now standing at respectful distances, their supervisors undoubtedly screaming instructions through their earpieces about treating billionaire customers with appropriate deference. Airport management was probably drafting apology letters while lawyers calculated settlement figures for the public humiliation of someone whose agricultural empire employed thousands of people. The fascinating thing about assumptions, Marcus concluded, checking his watch one final time, is how expensive they can become when you're wrong. He began walking toward the showroom exit, his mud-caked boots leaving one final trail across the Italian marble. A reminder that authentic success sometimes left marks that couldn't be polished away. The crowd parted before him like he was royalty, which in the agricultural world he essentially was. Behind him, Brad stood frozen in the wreckage of his career, while Sarah frantically tried to calculate whether chasing after a departing billionaire would make the situation better or worse. These life stories always end the same way, with real-life stories proving that touching stories about human dignity matter more than black stories about prejudice and power, even when the lesson costs someone $2.54 million in lost commissions. 11:02 a.m. Marcus had reached the showroom exit when his device chimed with an incoming priority call that made him pause, his finger hovering over the answer button as airport announcements echoed around them. "Mr. Chen!" Sarah called desperately, her voice cracking with panic as she realized her company's most valuable potential customer was about to walk away forever. "Please wait. I need to call my regional director immediately." Marcus turned back toward the crowd, his expression unreadable as he accepted the call on his device. "Michael," he said calmly. "Yes, I'm still at the Miami showroom. No, the aircraft purchase has been educational." His conversation was brief but intense, conducted in technical English that suggested he was coordinating damage control across multiple business operations simultaneously. The showroom had transformed into something resembling a war room, with Sarah frantically dialing numbers while @Jet Life Reviews' live stream maintained its audience of 1.3 million viewers who were demanding real-time updates on what they dubbed Billionaire Farmergate. Social media had exploded with hashtags calling for accountability, boycotts, and justice for what was clearly the most expensive customer service disaster in aviation history. "Mr. Chen," Sarah pleaded, her phone pressed to her ear as she tried to reach corporate headquarters. "Our regional director, Michael Torres, is driving here personally. He'll be here in 15 minutes. Please, we need to make this right." Her voice carried the desperation of someone watching her career disintegrate in real time, while millions of people documented every moment. Marcus checked his titanium watch with the same precision he'd maintained throughout the encounter. 15 minutes, he repeated thoughtfully. "My logistics coordinator can adjust our Singapore operations schedule, but time has value in agriculture. Every minute of delay affects 17 time zones of production." His tone suggested this wasn't a threat, merely a statement of economic reality. Brad had collapsed into a nearby chair, his Armani suit wrinkled with sweat as the mathematical reality of his stupidity continued crushing his soul. $2.5 million in commission had just walked out the door because he judged a billionaire by his coveralls. His Harvard MBA felt like expensive toilet paper as he watched his career burn down in front of 1.3 million witnesses. The device in Marcus's hand began displaying real-time updates from his agricultural empire. Production reports from Singapore showing 47,000 pounds of vegetables harvested in the past hour. shipping manifests from California facilities, loading trucks for distribution across the West Coast, research data from Netherlands laboratories where his teams were developing growing techniques that would revolutionize food production worldwide. The interesting thing about agriculture, Marcus said to the crowd, his voice carrying across the silent showroom, is that it operates on different timescales than retail sales. Crops don't wait for customer service training. Markets don't pause for sensitivity workshops. When you insult the people who feed the world, there are consequences that extend far beyond commission checks. Sarah's phone conversation had become increasingly frantic as she tried to explain the situation to corporate executives who were probably having emergency meetings about viral damage control. Yes, sir, he's still here. No, sir, it was filmed live. 1.3 million viewers and climbing. Yes, sir, I understand the stock implications. 11:07 a.m. Marcus's patience was legendary in agricultural circles. You couldn't rush growing seasons or force harvests, but his expression suggested even billionaire patience had limits. His device displayed another priority message, this one from what appeared to be competitors offering immediate aircraft sales with appropriate respect for customers, regardless of their clothing choices. Mr. Chen, Sarah said desperately, ending her call and approaching with the careful movements of someone trying not to spook a dangerous animal. Michael Torres is our regional director, 20 years in aviation sales, specialized in high-net-worth clients. He's personally handling your account now. Her voice carried forced optimism that fooled nobody, least of all someone who'd built a multi-billion-dollar empire by reading people's true intentions. The showroom doors burst open as Michael Torres arrived like a man trying to prevent nuclear war. At 55, he'd seen enough sales disasters to recognize when immediate action was required, and he moved through the crowd with the focused intensity of someone whose entire career depended on the next 10 minutes. His expensive suit and confident stride suggested he was accustomed to handling difficult situations, though nothing had prepared him for apologizing to a billionaire who'd been humiliated on live television. Mr. Chen, Michael said, approaching with extended hand and practiced smile. I'm Michael Torres, Regional Director for Prestige Aviation. I want to personally apologize for the inexcusable treatment you've received. This does not represent our company's values or standards. His voice carried the smooth authority of someone who'd spent decades managing corporate crises. Marcus studied the extended hand for several seconds before accepting it, his grip firm but brief. Mr. Torres, he replied politely, your employee suggested I try McDonald's for lunch, called me a vagrant, and recommended I visit a used car lot instead of your showroom. He then attempted to have me arrested for the crime of wanting to purchase aircraft while wearing work clothes. The words hit Michael like physical blows, each one representing millions in potential lawsuits and billions in lost business opportunities. Behind him, Brad had gone completely pale as he realized his regional director was now personally dealing with the consequences of his prejudice. The Harvard MBA pin on his lapel seemed to mock him with its promise of professional competence. Furthermore, Marcus continued, his voice remaining conversational despite the devastating content, your entire interaction was live-streamed to over 1 million viewers, is currently trending globally across multiple platforms, and has generated what I estimate to be approximately negative $40 million in publicity value for your company. Michael's practiced smile faltered as he processed the scope of the disaster. Negative $40 million in publicity meant stock price impacts, customer defections, and corporate damage that would take years to repair. Mr. Chen, what can we do to make this right? How can Prestige Aviation earn your forgiveness and your business? Marcus activated his device again, displaying the aircraft specifications he'd researched months in advance. I need 3 Gulfstream G650s with custom agricultural monitoring equipment. Total purchase price approximately $127 million. The question is whether I purchase them from a company that judges customers by their appearance or from competitors who understand that wealth comes in many forms. The number hit Michael like lightning. $127 million represented the largest single sale in the showroom's history. Enough commission to make Brad wealthy for life, enough profit to justify Michael's entire annual budget. Instead, it was walking out the door because his employee had confused a billionaire for a homeless person. "Mr. Chen," Michael said carefully, "I want to offer you our premium VIP service package, complete customization support, and a formal apology from our company president. We'll also implement immediate changes to prevent this kind of discrimination from ever happening again." His offer sounded desperate because this was corporate triage performed under the scrutiny of global social media. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, then showed his device's screen to Michael. The display showed communication logs with 3 competing aviation companies, all offering immediate sales consultations with guaranteed respect regardless of customer appearance. "The challenge, Mr. Torres, is that trust, once broken, requires more than apologies to repair. Your company's values were revealed today, and 1.3 million people witnessed them clearly." Sarah had been frantically taking notes, trying to document every commitment Michael was making for legal protection. The conversation was being recorded by dozens of phones, and every promise would be scrutinized by armies of lawyers if this situation escalated to litigation. Her retail training had never covered managing public relations disasters involving billionaire agricultural innovators. "What would rebuild that trust?" Michael asked directly, abandoning corporate diplomacy for honest conversation. "What would demonstrate that Prestige Aviation has learned from this mistake and deserves your business?" His question carried genuine respect, the first authentic emotion anyone from the company had shown throughout the entire encounter. Marcus checked his watch again, calculating time zones and production schedules with the precision that had built his agricultural empire. "Actions, Mr. Torres, not words. Your industry has a discrimination problem that extends far beyond today's incident. Change the system, and we can discuss aircraft purchases. Continue judging customers by their clothes, and my $127 million will go elsewhere." The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down, while 1.3 million viewers waited to see whether corporate America would choose profits over prejudice, or whether touching stories about human dignity would lose to black stories about institutional bias in real-life stories that defined entire industries. 11:15 a.m. Marcus's ultimatum hung in the air like a surgical blade as Michael Torres reached for his phone with the desperate efficiency of a man trying to save his career. "Mr. Chen, I'm calling our company president right now. This stops today." His fingers moved across the screen with practiced urgency while Jet Life Reviews' audience held its collective breath, 1.4 million viewers waiting to see whether corporate America would choose evolution or extinction. The call connected within seconds, speakerphone crackling to life as CEO Jonathan Whitfield's voice filled the showroom. "Michael, I've been watching the live stream. This is a catastrophe." His tone carried the weight of someone watching stock prices plummet in real time, while social media demanded accountability from one of aviation's most prestigious companies. "Sir, I have Mr. Marcus Chen here personally," Michael replied, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. "He's requesting immediate systemic changes to prevent discrimination, and frankly, we need to implement them whether he buys aircraft or not. This goes beyond any single sale." The admission that ethics mattered more than profit seemed to catch everyone off guard, including Marcus, whose expression shifted slightly toward something resembling approval. Brad had become a ghost haunting his own disaster, slumped in his chair as his Harvard MBA felt increasingly worthless with each passing minute. The mathematical reality continued crushing him. $2.54 million in lost commission, career destruction broadcast globally, and the knowledge that his prejudice had just cost his company the largest sale in showroom history. "Mr. Chen," Whitfield's voice carried across the speaker with genuine contrition, "I'm implementing immediate changes effective today. Brad Wellington is suspended pending investigation. All sales staff will undergo mandatory bias training within 48 hours. We're establishing anonymous customer feedback systems and diversity monitoring protocols." Yes, his promises came rapid fire, suggesting legal teams were drafting policy changes in real time. Marcus activated his device, displaying what appeared to be a note-taking application where he was recording each commitment with timestamps and specificity that suggested these promises would become legally binding obligations. Mr. Whitfield, systemic change requires more than training seminars. What monitoring mechanisms will ensure these policies are actually implemented rather than forgotten when media attention fades? The question demonstrated why Marcus had built a multi-billion-dollar empire. He understood that sustainable change required accountability mechanisms, not just good intentions. Around him, the crowd continued filming, creating permanent documentation that would make corporate backsliding impossible without massive public relations consequences. "We're implementing the Dignity First customer service standard," Whitfield announced, his voice gaining confidence as he outlined comprehensive reforms. "Every customer interaction will be monitored through our new bias detection software. Anonymous shopping programs will test our staff monthly. Customer feedback systems will be reviewed by external diversity consultants." The specificity suggested he'd been consulting with legal and HR teams during the conversation. Sarah had been frantically documenting every commitment, realizing that her showroom was becoming ground zero for industry-wide policy changes that would affect aviation sales globally. Social media was already amplifying the reforms, with other companies announcing similar policies to avoid becoming the next viral discrimination target. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression suggesting cautious optimism rather than complete satisfaction. "Implementation timeline?" he asked simply, his tone indicating this was a make-or-break question that would determine whether Prestige Aviation earned his business or joined the ranks of companies that chose prejudice over progress. "Bias training begins tomorrow," Whitfield replied immediately. "Software installation within 1 week. External monitoring starts within 30 days. Mr. Chen, we're also establishing a customer dignity fund. $100,000 donated to agricultural education programs as demonstration of our commitment to the communities you serve." The financial commitment showed he understood that symbolic gestures required substantial backing. For the first time since entering the showroom, Marcus smiled genuinely. "Agricultural education," he repeated, his voice carrying approval that felt like sunlight after a storm. "Young farmers need opportunities to learn that success comes in many forms, and that judging people by appearances destroys potential that could feed the world." His words carried the weight of someone who'd overcome similar prejudice to build an empire. "Does this earn consideration for our aircraft sales?" Michael asked hopefully, though his tone suggested he understood that trust rebuilding would require more than promises, regardless of how comprehensive they appeared. Marcus checked his titanium watch, calculating time zones and production schedules with the same precision he'd maintained throughout the encounter. "Actions earn consideration, Mr. Torres. Implement these changes, demonstrate their effectiveness, and we can discuss my fleet expansion needs." He paused, looking directly at the cameras still recording. "But understand, I'll be watching, and so will 1.4 million other people." The threat was velvet-wrapped but unmistakable. Corporate accountability would be permanent and public, with social media ensuring that any backsliding would generate immediate consequences. Brad's humiliation had become a cautionary tale that would influence customer service training across multiple industries. These real-life stories prove that touching stories about human dignity can generate systemic change when Black stories about prejudice meet consequences that matter. Life stories that transform entire industries, one viral moment at a time. 11:25 a.m. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood in the same showroom wearing his signature coveralls, dirt still under his fingernails from the morning harvest, but this time the reception was radically different. Sarah Mitchell approached with genuine respect, her smile reflecting the cultural transformation that had swept through Prestige Aviation like a cleansing wildfire. Behind her, new employees moved with the kind of inclusive professionalism that treated every customer as potentially extraordinary. "Mr. Chen, your customized G650s are ready for final inspection," she announced proudly, gesturing toward 3 gleaming aircraft that represented $127 million in completed business. The agricultural monitoring equipment integrated seamlessly into each cabin, transforming luxury jets into mobile command centers for feeding the world. The satellite communication arrays you requested are functioning perfectly across all 17 time zones. Brad Wellington III was nowhere to be seen, his Harvard MBA now serving him at a used car dealership across town, where his prejudicial assumptions were limited to smaller commission checks. His replacement, Maria Santos, approached Marcus with the kind of respectful professionalism that recognized wealth came in work clothes as often as designer suits. "Sir, the pilot training programs for your agricultural fleet coordination are scheduled to begin next week," she reported efficiently. Jet Life Reviews had parlayed her viral coverage into a documentary about discrimination in luxury retail, generating millions in donations for agricultural education programs while building her platform into a force for social justice. Her investigation revealed that Marcus's experience wasn't isolated. Luxury industries worldwide were failing customers who didn't conform to narrow definitions of wealth appearance. The Dignity First protocols had spread beyond aviation into automotive, real estate, and luxury retail sectors as companies scrambled to avoid becoming the next viral discrimination target. Anonymous shopping programs revealed systemic bias that cost industries billions in lost sales annually, while social media accountability made prejudice an expensive business proposition that smart companies abandoned quickly. Marcus's agricultural empire had expanded exponentially, with his 3 new jets enabling coordination across 847 vertical farms that now supplied 31% of North America's fresh produce. The same hands that had been dismissed for carrying honest dirt were now feeding millions while generating wealth that funded educational programs for young farmers worldwide. The beautiful irony, Marcus reflected, watching his jets being prepared for departure to Singapore, is that this showroom's transformation proves what agriculture teaches. Real growth requires the right environment, proper cultivation, and respect for what might seem insignificant, but contains extraordinary potential. The mathematical legacy was stunning. Brad's 10 minutes of prejudice had cost him $2.54 million in commission, destroyed his career, and generated negative publicity worth approximately $60 million. Meanwhile, Marcus's patient dignity had created systemic changes affecting thousands of employees and millions of customers across multiple industries. These black stories reveal profound truths about power, privilege, and the price of assumptions. Touching stories that prove human dignity cannot be measured by designer labels or expensive accessories. Real-life stories demonstrating that authentic success often wears work clothes, carries honest dirt, and speaks with the quiet authority of someone who understands fundamental value. Life stories showing that viral moments can transform entire industries when injustice meets accountability. The next time you witness discrimination, remember that phones have cameras, social media has memory, and justice sometimes arrives wearing coveralls with billionaire bank accounts. Share this story if you believe dignity matters more than appearances. Comment below with your own experiences of being judged unfairly. Subscribe for more real-life stories that prove first impressions can be devastatingly expensive when you're wrong about who you're dismissing. Because in a world where everyone has cameras and consequences can go viral instantly, treating people with respect isn't just morally right, it's the smartest business decision you'll ever make.